My name's Apple. I run the most transparent agency that helps creators get paid. This week, we helped our creators make $729,000. Here's exactly how we did it. The first deal we did was for $204,000 with a creator that has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. This was for 12 60-second integrations, so it came out to a rate of $17,000 per integration. Now, how did this deal come to be? Well, it was an inbound renewal that we received from a brand that we had been working with for a number of months. So we initially tested one video with this brand in Q2 of 2024. Then we did a 3 video renewal with the brand in Q3 of 2024. And then in Q4, we discussed and locked in this 12 video renewal for the entirety of 2025. Now, in order to get this deal done, there were a couple of problems that we had to solve. The first of which is that there were too many cooks in the kitchen. Anytime you're doing a brand partnership, there can be a number of different intermediaries that exist between the brand and the creator. The most simple of which would be one, if there's an agency representing the creator, in this case, that would be us. Or on the other side, there could be an agency representing the brand. So brands will oftentimes hire an agency in order to help them streamline their influencer marketing efforts, work with more creators, and overall just get more things done without being as taxing to their internal bandwidth. So those are the two most common intermediaries. But in previous episodes, we talked about how there can be middlemen that kind of muck up the entire transaction. And so you end up playing this game of broken telephone where messages aren't getting properly communicated. People are taking cuts out of the deal along the way. And it really just leads to a pretty messy situation. Now, from the creator side, this hurts their ability to be creative because a lot of times these middlemen can be, pretty lazy. And so if the creator has an idea that's a little bit outside of the box, it's not quite your standard, 60-second ad read. A lot of times these middlemen just don't want to be bothered to deal with that, right? They would rather just say, no, we have to keep this deal very simple. We have to keep this partnership just to, these standard ad units. Whereas maybe the creator knows a better way to get more conversions, reach more people, but that middleman is just not allowing that particular deal or those deliverables to go through. On the same note, that middleman might not have a strong relationship with the brand to begin with. And so if that's the case, then you're also running into this issue where the middleman is trying to, tread carefully, not damage the relationship with the brand. In doing so, making life harder for the creator by not being as receptive and not being as, informed on what the brand actually cares about in order to move things forward. The next problem with these intermediaries is that their loyalty lies with making life as easy as possible for themselves and making as much money as possible for themselves. They don't really care about the creator. They don't really care about the brand. They're not thinking about the long term. All they're really thinking about is how do I get as much money in my pocket as quickly as possible. Effectively mucks things up for the creator. Also mucks things up for the brand because it creates a less efficient process for getting partnerships done. So for this deal in particular, what we were looking at was a very long chain of communication. So started off with the brand. Then there was middleman number one, which the brand had hired to help them, scale their influencer marketing efforts. And then we had middleman number two, which the brand had not hired and weren't even aware of. Then after that, we reached creators agency and the creator. But in order to pass a message to the brand, we had to go through 2 different intermediaries in order to get there. And then on top of that, middleman number one's taken 15% off the top of this deal. Middleman number two was taking another 30% off of this deal. And that's because oftentimes these, non-hired intermediaries, they need to take a higher rate because they're involved in fewer deals. They're involved in less spending. Middleman number one's been hired by this brand to allocate all of their influencer dollars. They don't need to take as high of a percentage because they know that they're going to be facilitating a lot of brand deals. But middleman number two, that's just trying to get a piece of whatever they can, has to take that higher 30% just to, ensure that they're able to make a profit. So a deal that was, $204,000 became a $120,000 offer by the time it reached the creator. So that's what the brand came to us with. But at the time, we didn't know that middleman number two wasn't actually hired by the brand because a lot of times it's very difficult to know this. We were interfacing with them. They were the only point of contact that we had. And when we asked them, they told us that they worked directly with the brand and that they were hired to do so. So that's, what we thought was the case. Turned out this absolutely wasn't true. And while we had assumed that this was the case, right? And so we were okay working with them on those first initial tests that we ran with the brand, we started to run into some issues that led us to question whether or not they were actually hired by the brand. Specifically, things were taking a lot longer than they should have. We began to suspect that they were not quite the people that we thought they were. And so what we decided to do was reach out to a representative at the brand directly. So our intention here was not to cut out this person we were working with. We just wanted to get the full picture because we suspected that what we were getting from this intermediary was not, in fact, the full picture. Turns out they weren't even aware of middleman two, the person that we had been interfacing with. Major red flag, right? If the brand didn't hire them and we didn't hire them, who hired them, right? Nobody hired you. They're just there, trying to make a quick buck. So that was not great. So on top of that, they had also expressed some concerns with how the communication had been going on this particular deal. So we were upset about communication. They were upset about communication. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like if everyone's not having a good time with communication and thinking things are taking too long, and the issue was very clear. So at that point, we asked them how they preferred to move forward. And so the decision that the brand came to is that they wanted to work directly with us. Now, I think a big part of the reason why they decided to do that, right? Because they had hired somebody who was allocating all of their influencer spend, right? So what we suspected they were going to say is like, okay, go talk to middleman one, the person we actually hired to do our influencer spending, go work with them. But they didn't say that. They said, hey, we just want to work with you guys directly. And I think the reason that came to be is because we started to build the relationship with them on a foundation of complete transparency. So when we got on that first call with the brand, and we honestly, we took like 3 or 4 calls with the brand just to kind of figure out exactly what was going on because there were so many moving pieces and both sides were just frankly pretty confused. We were completely transparent with all the numbers that had been discussed with us. We were transparent around who we'd been talking to. And really, we were just like putting all of our cards on the table to show them that we were there to build a relationship, that we weren't trying to, reach out to them to screw anybody over. We were reaching out to them in order to just like get the most effective deal done and just make sure that everybody was having a positive experience, which at the time they were not. And with this deal in particular, we now have much better economics for the creator. And we've got great reputation with the brand, right? So the deal ended up being $204,000 instead of $120,000. So for the brand, still the same money out of their pocket, same 204 grand. Only difference is now all of that's going to creator instead of getting split amongst these multiple intermediaries. The second problem with this deal is that the rate was too low. So that initial 120 that they presented was not going to get over the line, right? The creator had grown substantially throughout 2024. The brand was seeing positive ROI. And like we always say, we need to be ratcheting up those rates, setting appropriate expectations with brands. So in this case, by advocating for the needs of both of the parties and by building that strong relationship built on mutual trust, we were able to get way more money in the creator's pocket without the brand needing to spend more and still setting proper expectations that over time rates would need to continue to go up. There were also a few things in the contract when we went direct with the brand that got a little bit problematic because as we were working through intermediary two, we were using their contract, but now we're working with the brand directly, we're using a different contract. So after we put that through review, we realized there were a few things that the brand was kind of trying to slip in there that were not the most favorable towards the creator. They slipped some paid usage in the contract that they were going to use to boost the creator's content and get it in front of more people, which was not included in the scope that we talked about. And then they wanted some really overbearing exclusivity that was going to include a lot of companies that transparently didn't really compete with this brand. So that's something that we're always looking out for in contracts. Anytime there's exclusivity, it has to be named. We need named competitors there. And the named competitor list, oftentimes, it can't be 50 different brands. It's got to be pretty specific just to companies that actually do compete with this particular company. Now, with this partnership, there were some missed opportunities that I think it's important to mention. The first of which that we could have gathered more data on the past campaigns that we ran to better inform the rates and the strategies. So we had already done 2 campaigns with this brand. So when we got in direct contact with the brand, our priority was really just getting a deal done and building that relationship more so than, trying to gather as much data as possible to inform specific rates, right? Because number one priority, we get the relationship built. Then from there, once we're on good terms, then we've got a lot more access to data. Then we've got a lot more negotiating leverage. But we really did not get any data before moving into this direct partnership. We also could have explored upselling usage and exclusivity rather than removing them entirely. Initially, it didn't seem like the brand was going to be willing to pay for these things, but it could have been worth putting a little bit more effort into trying to get a number prescribed to those and getting them added onto the deal. Also could have been worthwhile to put an expansion plan in place based on Q1 results. So something that I always like to do is to have a trajectory in mind for where do things go from here if they perform well, right? So they're locking in for 12 months. That's awesome. But what if Q1 rolls around, we get them phenomenal results. Now they're working directly with us. We can iterate faster. We can get more things done. We can just get better messaging. Is there a route for building out this partnership further, right? So what I would have liked to do here is kind of get some clear benchmarks, timelines in place for some data evaluation so that we could determine, hey, if we're seeing these kinds of results, that would justify investing more money, doing more content, and building out the partnership further before, waiting for this whole 12-month contract to be up. We also could have done a better job at emphasizing, what sets creators agency apart from these different intermediaries that they were previously working through. This is stuff that they're going to, find out over time if you're working with us, but we could have done a better job up front and just being very clear on like, hey, your life's going to get a lot better by working with us. Here's how that's going to happen. And then walking the walk as the partnership goes on. Now, from here, as you would expect, we're going to iterate based on the initial results from this partnership. We're going to run some A/B testing. We're going to try different messaging, calls to actions, ad placements, really just figure out what works best for this brand as quickly as possible to get those strong results throughout the course of the year, hopefully expand the partnership. We're going to be focused on providing stellar service to this brand, walk the walk on our differentiators, really just make them very happy that they decided to work directly with us. This is going to look like regular check-ins. This is going to look like data transparency on our end. And this is just going to look like going above and beyond with communication to make sure that they know that we truly care about them getting the best results possible. And we're not just here to cash a quick check. We're also going to be anticipating their long-term needs, figure out how to scale this partnership throughout 2025, right? Which other creators can we bring on board? How can we double down with the existing creators? And just based on what we learn about the brand, how can we always be thinking 3 steps ahead to make sure that we're giving them the things that they don't even know to ask for yet? Also, make sure to stick around to the end because I'm going to boil down the biggest takeaways and learnings from all of these deals and some experiments that we're running internally. This second deal was a bit of a monster deal. So there were 3 different creators included on this deal, and the total deal value was over $515,000. So looking at anywhere from $165,000 to $180,000 per creator, with all of these creators having over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. With each of these creators, we locked in 12 60-second integrations, 1 per month throughout the entire year of 2025. How this deal came about is we first tested with all of these creators in Q1 of 2024. Then in Q2 and Q3, we renewed with all of these creators for somewhere between 5 and 12 videos throughout the remainder of 2024. And then in Q4, we kicked off the 2025 renewal conversation, which led to this monster of a deal getting signed. However, there were 2 major problems with this deal that we had to solve in order to get it through. The first of which is that rates were misaligned, and this is a common problem that we run into with a lot of long-term renewals because in this case, as in many, the brand wanted to continue on at those previous rates. So the brand locked in, 5 to 12 videos at 2024 rates. And then for 2025, they're like, great, let's just keep doing the same thing. Let's do the same number of videos, same rates, no problem, right? Well, there was a little bit of a problem because the creators had grown, anywhere from 10 to 50% since those previous deals had been signed. And so rates did need to change in order to reflect that growth because what the brand is paying for has changed. So the rate they're paying for needs to change as well. However, it was a little bit of a balancing act here, right? Because the creators wanted to lock in as many 2025 deliverables as possible. They wanted that consistency, that predictability, knowing where their income's going to come from, and just, guaranteeing themselves 6-figure income throughout the course of the year with this single partnership. And then on the same note, the brand's got similar goals, right? Because they spent all of this money with these creators in 2024, got positive results, and they just want to reinvest in this thing that they already know works because, as always, easier to spend money on something you know works than running a bunch of tests with unproven things. Well, long story short, we increased the rates. So based on the growth of each of these channels throughout 2024, we increased rates for each creator somewhere around 10 to 15%. So not totally reflective of how large their channels had grown throughout that time period. But again, we're balancing that consistency and predictability that these creators are looking for with their desire to get rates up as well. One thing we did with these rates, though, is that we baked in the expectation that rates could be renegotiated throughout the year based on the results that we brought in, right? So if some of our creators are growing incredibly fast, bringing in incredible results for the brand, far surpassing expectations in terms of, how many views per video they're bringing in, because in this case, the brand cares a lot about views and CPM, then we set the expectation that, hey, at that point, we're going to have a conversation about what rates need to look like. And on the same note, if views go dramatically down, we're going to be super reasonable with negotiating with brands in that direction as well, because it's a 2-way street, right? If we're just strong arming them in the case that what they've paid for has changed substantially in the wrong direction, but then when it goes in our favor, we're strong arming them into a different deal. That's not really fair. Now, the second problem with this deal is that there was an unreasonable make good clause, as well as some other terms that weren't quite in the creator's favor, nor were quite fair. So make goods are a really important topic to cover. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on them. Personally, I think make goods can be a very effective way to structure fair deals. Some creators have extremely unpredictable performance, right? One video might get 100,000 views, the next video might get a million views, and the next one has 300,000 views, right? And so from that standpoint, if a brand is buying a video with this creator, they don't necessarily know what they're buying. So make goods can be used to kind of smooth out results a little bit. And especially on long-term deals, I think make goods can be extremely, extremely effective at getting brands on board and kind of just like easing some of their concerns around performance. And so in this case, the make good clause that the brand wanted was with each video that we posted, they'd be evaluating the views that that video got. And if they didn't reach a certain level, then we'd have to give them a second video for free. In this case, I felt that was not fair. I felt that was not in the best, spirit of this partnership. And I felt there was a much better way that we could accomplish their goal, right? Because their goal, when you boil it down, is they don't want to get screwed, right? They don't want to end up paying for a bunch of duds. And so they've got this make good clause in there to make sure they don't just end up paying for a bunch of duds. Well, if we're doing a 12-month partnership with 12 different videos, it's not really in the spirit of the deal to look at each video individually. If we were just doing one video, then right, look at one video. But we're doing 12 videos. This is a year-long partnership. So we should be looking at the partnership holistically. And so what we were able to do is move from a make good clause where we're looking at one video individually, and we look at all 12 videos cumulatively. And then we set a cumulative view goal because the brand cares about CPM. Transparently, makes little difference to them whether they achieve that CPM every single month. They just need to get it throughout the entire course of the partnership. And so what we're able to do, align on a make good clause where, we, at the end of the partnership, we post all the videos, we wait 60 days, and then we total up all of the views on all 12 videos. And if they're over the, threshold that we set, no make good is needed. If they're under that threshold, there are a couple of different tiers, so did we miss about 2%? If that's the case, then no make good is needed because we're basically there. But if we missed it by, 20%, then that's a different story. And then there's kind of different levels of make goods based on how much you missed it. So is it just like a quick Instagram story? Is it a whole nother, integration? Are we just reposting an old integration? And so we've got different kind of thresholds there based on how far we miss it by. If they did end up missing that threshold by a large margin, then the expectation that we have set with our creators is that like they're going to want to work with the brand to make sure that everybody's happy because, this brand's cutting them a 6-figure check in 2025. If they want that same 6 figures in 2026, then it's in everybody's best interest for them to, make sure that everybody feels good. So even though they're contractually obligated to maybe just do one make good, if a creator's missing that view target by, 30%, they're probably going to post a couple more videos in order to get as close to that number as possible to make sure that the brand is happy. There were also some problems on this contract with exclusivity, which was super interesting because like we're renewing with the same brand for the same partnership and they're changing up the contract. And so that's one thing you got to watch out for. Typically with long-term brand partners, they're not going to do that, right? Because they want to maintain a good relationship, right? Like they're not going to try to be sneaky. In this case, these guys were trying to be a little bit sneaky and include some, broad exclusivity that just like didn't really make sense. And I think they were just hoping that we wouldn't do a close reading of the contract, but we ended up just getting that exclusivity back to the same exclusivity that we agreed to for the previous contract, because that's what we were agreeing to and negotiating based on. So a good reminder, just make sure you're always thoroughly reading your contracts, even if it's a company you've been working with for a very long time. Now, I wouldn't say there were too many missed opportunities here. I think getting rates up proportionate to viewership would have been a good thing. That didn't quite happen. So rates went up, but not quite proportionate to viewership. We could have potentially taken a harder stance here, but realistically, the brand held a lot of sway. The creators wanted consistency, and it wasn't really worthwhile to rock the boat too much over really what would have amounted to potentially an extra, $10,000 to $20,000 per deal. Like the creators were just like, nah, like let's just get the deals done. Let's collect the money. Let's pass go and do this again next year. I also think that we maybe could have pushed a little bit harder to get the number of deliverables beyond 12 per creator. I mean, we tried. The brand was pretty firm on that. So again, it was a matter of like, do we really want to rock the boat on this and try to get to, 14, 16, maybe even 18 deliverables throughout the course of the year? Or, do we just need to stay at 12 and call it good and call it happy? So from here, we're really just ensuring that those impression targets that we set are met and exceeded in Q1. Make sure that we're tracking to those view thresholds that we set out for the entire partnership. And then, if we really knock it out of the park in the first quarter or two of the year, then we're able to renegotiate the contracts based on, any stellar performance that we see from these creators. This third deal, smaller than the others by quite a wide margins. This one was a $10,000 deal, but I'm pretty excited about this one because it came about extremely quickly. And it's an example of the kind of deal that oftentimes just wouldn't go through without somebody, like us caring enough to actually make it happen and facilitating the give and take that was required for this particular deal to go through. So in this case, this creator had over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and the deliverable was a 15 to 30-second shout out. Honestly, the duration of the shout out wasn't even predetermined in the contract. It was very vague. It was kind of just like, hey, we just need a shout out. And this came about extremely last minute because we had this brand that really wanted to work with this particular creator, and they'd been wanting to work with them for like years. And there just hadn't been a right time and a right place because the creator's typically charging, $50,000 or more to partner with them. They're a massive creator on YouTube, so their rates are very premium. And this brand really just could not afford premium rates. They're not a premium price product, and they don't have crazy profit margins that they can invest in marketing. And so it was really just like, dang, we really want to work with them, but it's just not really panning out because we don't have the money and they're not willing to, sell us ads at a super low rate. However, I was having to check in with this creator, figuring out, what content they had coming up in the pipeline. And they had a video coming up in the next 1 to 2 weeks that was absolutely perfect for this brand. But there was a problem. Creator already had a sponsor for this video. So we had to find a way to work around the existing video sponsor and get a deal done on a very short timeline because this video was coming out, less than 2 weeks. It's already pretty much done in the grand scheme of things. And the creator needs full creative freedom, right? This secondary sponsor can't just come in and say, hey, we want you to do everything differently. Like it wasn't going to happen that way. So what we really had to do here was set very effective expectations all around. And we are very much in the business of setting expectations. We had to set the expectation that like, hey, given that this is, a little bit of an afterthought, we're going to be looking at a much lower rate. And so I initially set the expectation that the rate was going to be closer to like $5,000. It's like, hey, if we get this done for like $5,000, like, could you throw them in this video? Super quick mention. So super low lift on the creator side. I go to the brand, and on the brand side, we have to set expectations as well that they're not going to get a lot of the things that they usually get when they're partnering with a creator. So one, they're not going to get control. They're not going to get creative control. They're not going to get a full review process. It's going to be a lot lighter touch on the brand side. They're not going to get that link in description, but what they do get is they get to work with this creator that they've been wanting to work with for years. So once those expectations were effectively set on both sides, deal was closed in less than 48 hours. So super easy dub for the creator, incredibly easy partnership all around for both parties. And the only reason this was able to get done is because we had a really strong relationship with both parties and we could set effective expectations from the get-go that everyone was bought in for. If both of those things weren't in place, this deal would not have gone through. Honestly, not a ton in terms of missed opportunities here. The only real missed opportunity here was potentially getting the brand interested in other platforms that had more ad inventory, but we were really just in a bit of a hurry to get this thing over the line. So we weren't too focused on upselling, cross-selling different things. At this point, now that the video has gone live, we're chipping away at this with the brand and working on continuing this relationship with a 6-figure partnership because the video has already gone live. It's got over 1 million views. The brand is extremely happy with results. I mean, extremely, extremely happy. They paid a fraction of what it typically costs to work with this creator. Ended up getting, millions of views on the video. Creator honestly really over delivered. Like the creator went above and beyond. I was extremely, extremely happy when I saw what the creator put together here. And so that's put us in a great position to, get a 6-figure deal done with this brand, which should hopefully be going through in the near future. So what can you as a creator or just someone who's interested in the creator economy do with this information to, apply yourself? Well, first big takeaway is to play the long game. So we're always as a company thinking about, how do we make decisions that serve everybody for a very long period of time? And that's called building relationships. So be relationship oriented. Put your best foot forward when you are striking up a new relationship. Like that first deal when we, struck up a relationship with the brand directly. We're extremely transparent, put all of our cards on the table. That's what it takes to build effective relationships. The other piece of that is cutting fair deals. Establish a reputation for yourself that you're the type of person to cut fair deals. That's going to help you so much in the future because brands are going to start giving you the benefit of the doubt, right? If you establish yourself as somebody who is trustworthy, as someone who's good to work with, brands start deferring more and more to you. And they're not going to be so nitpicky about every little thing because they're going to know that your heart's in the right place, your head's in the right place, and that you are, at the end of the day, trying to help them achieve their goals. And it's only because of, this strong reputation of getting fair deals done that we were able to get that third deal actually signed and across the line with the brand and with the creator. If we didn't have a history of continuously doing that for both parties over the span of years, that deal just wouldn't have happened. Second takeaway, when you're working with long-term partners, you've got this delicate kind of balancing act to work with between giving them a good deal and making sure that things are fair for the creator, right? So on the one hand, you need to make sure that you're setting proper expectations for the long term. That means ratcheting rates up over time with brands. On the other side of things, you need to make sure the brand is being treated like a partner rather than a transaction. You want the brand to feel like you are in their corner and that you are looking out for them. It's in your best interest as a creator to work with brands instead of against them. So you need to make sure that they feel that way. A partnership is a give and take. Sometimes you get what you want, sometimes they get what they want. Typically, it's somewhere in the middle. And so that's where you want to, try to land when you're working with these brands. And then the third takeaway is to investigate yellow and red flags when they arise. So with that first deal, felt like it was moving too slow, felt like there were too many cooks in the kitchen. Something wasn't quite adding up. Turns out that's exactly what was going on. And so if we never investigated that, probably would not have been able to get a deal done there because there were too many people taking cuts out of the deal for us to get to an effective rate for the creator. So because we investigated that, we were able to, figure out what was going wrong. Generally, I find it's a good idea. Trust your gut when something doesn't add up. Something's probably wrong. So digging deeper into those things, always a good idea. Now, in terms of what we're working on right now behind the scenes, a few initiatives that I think could be potentially interesting. Right now, I wear a ton of different hats, right? Every single day, I'm doing a ton of different things. I'm negotiating deals. I'm talking to creators, talking to brands, strategic planning, training our talent managers, recording podcasts. I mean, there's a ton of different stuff on my plate. Same thing goes for our talent managers, right? They've got so many different things that they're doing, whether it's talking to brands, talking to creators, writing proposals, negotiating deals, looking at contracts. Like there's a lot of different things on the plate for everybody on the team. And so we're working on taking some of those things off of our plate that we're not experts in, right? I'm not an expert at a lot of different things. One of those things is recruiting. So we recently hired a recruiter that's helping us to find that high quality talent for a lot of different roles because that's just something that tried very valiantly over the past, couple of years to effectively recruit people. It's just not my strong suit. And so we're allowing everyone to specialize in what they're best at by taking those things off of your plate that could, better be done by somebody else, bringing experts into the bus to fill our individual skill gaps and our team-wide skill gaps. I don't know how far it's going to go, but we're exploring the idea of paying bounties for creator introductions. So like I mentioned, we're growing our roster right now. We're very intentional about the creators that we want in this roster expansion, right? We've got a list of people that we want to add over the course of Q1. And so in order to, punch up, we're looking at potentially paying our creators to make specific introductions that lead to, us doing business with new folks. Like I said, very targeted list of creators we want to work with. But, for creators that love working with us, it's kind of cool because it lets us pay them more money and build more goodwill with them. And so we're only implementing this right now with a very specific set of our creators that really love working with us, that we want, basically just an excuse to pay more money to, and who can also help us make those introductions to those kinds of creators that we want to work with. So that's the episode. Hope you got value out of it. See you in the next one.